Hey everyone! So today I'm here to tell you about The City and the City by China Mieville, a British author. I came to this book as I saw it listed for multiple awards. It just kept coming up. It tied The Wind-Up Girl for a Hugo Award. If you look back, I've already reviewed The Wind-Up Girl and was one of my favorites, so I thought, of course, I have to read this one because if it's as good as The Wind-Up Girl, I've got to read it. So I picked it up. It's also won the Locus Award, the World Fantasy Award, and a couple others. So that's pretty high praise. Mieville is known mostly for science fiction or weird fiction books. And this novel is sort of what they're calling a slipstream or genre-crossing novel, mainly in the weird fiction genre and kind of the detective noir fiction genre. It was supposedly written as a gift for the author's terminally ill mother. The story goes that she loved police procedurals, so he wrote this book for her, or in honor of her. It is also, I recently found out, inspired a British TV miniseries. I haven't watched that yet, but it's now on my list to see. So I can't speak for how well done that is yet. Let me know if you've seen it and if you've read the book. How do they compare? Because I haven't gotten to it yet. So The City and the City begins as sort of a routine detective novel. I don't usually read a lot of detective novels, one here and there, some of the classics. So when I picked it up thinking I was getting weird fiction or science fiction, I was a little confused at first, but there it was, so I kept reading. Basic detective novel. There's a murder. Our narrator is the inspector, Detective or Inspector Borlu, and he's called upon to investigate a murder case and catch the murderer, of course. So let me read you a bit of that. This is right from the beginning. Chapter 1. I could not see the street, or much of the estate. We were enclosed by dirt-colored blocks, from windows out of which leaned vested men and women with morning hair and mugs of drink, eating breakfast and watching us. This open ground between the buildings had once been sculpted. It pitched like a golf course, a child's mimicking of geography. Maybe they had been going to wood it and put in a pond. There was a copse, but the saplings were dead. The grass was weedy, threaded with paths foot-walked between rubbish, rutted by wheel tracks. There were police at various tasks. I wasn't the first detective there. I saw Bardo Naustein and a couple of others, but I was the most senior. I followed the sergeant to where most of my colleagues clustered, between a low derelict tower and a skateboard park ringed by big drum-shaped trash bins. Just beyond it we could hear the docks. A bunch of kids sat on a wall before standing officers. The gulls coiled over the gathering. "Inspector!" I nodded at whomever that was. Someone offered a coffee, but I shook my head and looked at the woman I had come to see. She lay near the skate ramps. Nothing is still like the dead are still. The wind moves their hair as it moved hers, and they don't respond at all. She was in an ugly pose with legs crooked as if about to get up, her arms in a strange bend. Her face was to the ground. A young woman, brown hair pulled up into pigtails poking up like plants. She was almost naked, and it was sad to see her skin smooth that cold morning, unbroken by goose flesh. She wore only laddered stockings, one high heel on. Seeing me look for it, a sergeant waved at me from far off. where she guarded the dropped shoe. It was a couple of hours since the body had been discovered. I looked her over. I held my breath and bent down toward the dirt to look at her face, but I could only see one open eye. So, pretty good start for, detective novel. Exactly what I would expect from any detective novel. But, along the way, of course, Inspector Borlu is hindered by the usual. The red tape, politics, traditions, cantankerous witnesses, all that kind of thing, just as you would expect. But then, there's the setting. You see, this setting is unusual. This is where things get weird. Very Mieville. Inspector Borlu lives and works in the city of Bezel. It's an old world crumbling sprawl in Eastern Europe. Obviously a fictional city, but still very Eastern European. The thing is that Bezel occupies the same physical space as the city of Ulcoma. Ulcoma is a thriving metropolis. These two cities, they're stacked together like Russian dolls, or intermeshed together in one big city, but they're very distinctively separate. Each has its own citizens, its own fashion, its own government, its own language, writing, laws, economy, completely separate. What's even odder, or perhaps trickier, is that the citizens of each of these two cities must not acknowledge the other in any way. They have to unsee everything about the other city. They must unsee its citizens, kind of like I'm going to unsee the cat right now. So they unsee the citizens, the buildings, the events, everything about the other city. Ignoring this rule of unseeing is a crime worse than murder. It's called breaching. And it's punished and regulated by a mysterious authority that kind of keeps everybody constantly under surveillance, a little like Big Brother in a way, from 1984. The authority is called the breach. The people who breach are just disappeared. Nobody sees them again. They're gone forever. Hello, Rami. You're being very helpful. Now, the revelation of this strange situation is very gradual. It doesn't start right away, just like the invasion of the cat. The first hints of this strangeness come from our narrator as he admits his own crimes. Let me read you another tiny little bit. So I'm going to jump just a bit and read you about 2 paragraphs here. See how this just kind of sneaks into the narrative. Sariska mocked me in my mind as I turned back to the night-lit city, and this time I looked and saw its neighbor. Illicit, but I did. Who hasn't done that at times? There were gas rooms I shouldn't see, chambers dangling ads, tethered by skeletal metal frames. On the street, at least one of the passers-by, I could tell by the clothes, the colors, the walk, was not in Bezel, and I watched him anyway. I turned to the railway lines a few meters by my window and waited until I knew it would eventually, as I knew it would eventually, a late train came. I looked into its rapidly passing illuminated windows and into the eyes of the few passengers, a very few of whom even saw me back, and were startled. But they were gone fast over the conjoined sets of roofs. It was a brief crime, and not their faults. They probably did not feel guilty for long. They probably did not remember that stare. I always wanted to live where I could watch foreign trains. So at this point, you almost don't know what that's about. It just comes off as odd, as strange. What is he trying to tell us? But soon the politics and the unique demands of this setting intrude on the case, and you get deeper and deeper into the difficulties caused by these overlapping cities. I'm going to give you one last tiny little read here. Let's see, I'm not even on page 40, so let's see. Dorwin was a tall and thin man in his late 30s. He wore several rings in his ears, a leather jacket with obscure and unmerited membership insignia of various military and other organizations on it. Anomalously, thanks, Kat, smart through dirty trousers, he eyed me unhappily, smoking. He was not arrested. Corwee had not taken him in. I nodded a greeting to her and then turned slowly, 180 degrees, and looked at the buildings around us. I focused only on the Bez ones, of course. Breach? I said. Droden looked startled. So in truth did Corwee, though she covered it. When Droden said nothing, I said, "Don't you think we're watched by powers?" "Yeah, no, we are." He sounded resentful. I'm sure he was. Sure. You asking me where they are? It is more or less a meaningless question, but one that no Bez or Ul Coleman can banish. Droden did not look anywhere other than in my eyes. You see that building over the road? The one that used to be a match factory? A mural's remains and scabs of paint almost a century old. A salamander smiling through its corona of flames. You see stuff moving in there. Stuff, like comes and goes, like it shouldn't. So you can see them appear? He looked uneasy again. You think that's where they manifest? No, but process of elimination. Droden, get in. We'll be in a second, Corwee said, nodding to him, and he went. What the fuck, boss? Problem? All this breach shit. She lowered her voice on breach. What are you doing? I did not say anything. I'm trying to establish a power dynamic here, and I'm at the end of it. Not breach, boss. I don't want that shit in the picture. Where the fuck are you getting this spooky shit from? When I still said nothing, she shook her head and led me inside. So you see, it becomes more and more invasive to the plot. And as the case unravels and twists, the novel demands kind of mental acrobatics at times. Eventually asking, what do we willfully unsee in our own lives? How far, how deep does our voluntary blindness go? And what do we lose in that violence? Now, you may think that I've given a lot away, but that wasn't even page 50. We've only barely scratched the surface of this book, so I assure you, I haven't given anything away. Well, like, share, subscribe. If you read the book, let me know. I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you've got book suggestions for me, I'd love to have those. If you're interested in buying The City and the City by China Mieville, use my link below. I get a teeny tiny little percentage just for fun, I guess. Would love to hear from you guys. See you next week.